Owning Space is a women's health podcast reclaiming the narrative, helping women take up more space in society, in their bodies, and in their stories. Hosted by me, Annika Hindocha, each episode explores a topic that's often dismissed, misunderstood, or considered too uncomfortable to discuss. My mission is to break the silence around the struggles so many women are told to push through or hide. From burnout to fertility challenges, endometriosis to ADHD, sexual trauma to MS, and more. We unpack how these experiences shape us differently, and how so many of us learn to mask the pain and just keep going. It's raw, real, and necessary, because silence helps no one, and it's time to change the way we talk about women's health, one honest conversation at a time. I'm so excited to welcome today's guest. Her work and personal journey speak directly to the heart of this podcast. Bianca Best is a 2-time best-selling author, global executive coach, keynote speaker, and mother of 4. For more than 20 years, she's held senior leadership roles in advertising and tech, working with household names such as Google, Amazon, L'Oreal, and Meta. She also became the first global managing director for digital transformation at Publicis Group, spearheading innovation on a global scale. But behind the achievements was a growing sense of depletion. Like so many high-performing women, Bianca found herself deep in burnout, which lasted a number of years. Instead of pushing through, she chose to pause, reflect, and rebuild. Bianca didn't just recover from burnout, she transformed her entire relationship with work and well-being. She created the Escape Method, a practical and empowering framework to help women reclaim their clarity, energy, and joy. In her most recent book, Big Impact Without Burnout, she introduces 8 energizing strategies designed to help women stop struggling and start soaring. The book is more than a guide to recovery. It's a deeply compassionate, actionable blueprint for preventing burnout and redefining what sustainable success really looks like. For me, it's become a go-to guide, holistic, inspiring, and genuinely grounding. And I truly believe it can support anyone navigating burnout, overwhelm, or the pressure to constantly do it all. In her own words, Bianca has said, "There's no shame in burnout. Let's shrink it by talking about it." And in her thought leadership, she calls out burnout as an energy crisis that demands awareness and action. She's also the author of Flourish and How to Stop the Struggle, books that reveal her broad dedication to vibrant health and wholehearted living. In today's episode, we'll explore how burnout really takes hold, particularly for women, why many of us feel the need to mask it, and what it truly means to rebuild from a place of sustainable power, not depletion. Bianca, I'm so glad you're here. Welcome to Owning Space. Hello.
Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm super excited about the conversation we're about to have.
I'm so excited too. So let's dive in. In your book, Big Impact Without Burnout, you write, "We believe burnout is the price we pay to be successful. We don't question the hustle. We just survive it." I wanted to ask you, when you stopped surviving and started questioning, what did that moment look like for you?
It's such a big question and such an important one. And there was no one crescendo moment where that became a turning point. For me, it was a gradual increase in the intensity of burnout episodes. I mean, I have recovered from burnout, as you say, but I was a cyclical burnout sufferer. And what happened as my life started to expand in my early 20s is that I had just subscribed to this myth that having it all meant doing it all. And I was hugely ambitious, I still am, but I'd never learned the importance of self-management in stepping into ambition. So I just kept on taking more, from having 4 children to launching a business to continuing to apply myself to all the rich and fizzy domains of my life without actually pausing and reflecting, well, hang on a minute, I just took on more. And unsurprisingly, I kept cracking. I mean, I literally kept cracking. And the burnout episodes for me started initially with a cold becoming a flu. So everyone in the house would get a cold, but I'd have a flu. And then eventually the flus became pneumonias. And eventually I was having total immune collapse and I became hospitalized. And the doctor said to me, "You are in severe immune collapse. If you don't change something right now, then you're not going to be able to sustain. Everything is starting to shut down physiologically. And in that moment, I was in total denial. He said, you're in chronic stress, and that stress is shutting down your immune system. And I said, I'm not stressed. I'm not stressed. I'm living the dream with my business and my children, because I didn't know any other way. I thought I had to push on through. And so I gradually started realizing I couldn't recover from burnout, hop back on the treadmill and ignore the fact that my body was literally flooring me, quite literally. So I started to try and modify my life in such a way where I could still have the impact I wanted, but not fall over. But I would honestly admit that took me a good decade of self-exploration and a lot of study and a lot of trial and error until I got to around 2015, and that was the last time I burnt out. And then I realised I've cracked it. I have actually got the code to sustainable success, to achieving and maintaining success with grace. And that's what I've bottled up in my work, because people started asking, how can you do it? How can you run a business and have a full-time career and 4 children and run every morning and keep smiling and have lots of friends and a life? How do you do it? So I've bottled it up, and that's the work that I now do in my writing and the burnout business, which I run today.
That's incredible. I want to go back for a second, and you spoke about this kind of drive for success and this drive for, potentially having it all. With that drive, where do you think that stems from? Where do you think it comes from? Is it from an early age? Have you, always were you like that at school?
Was I like that at school? I think the desire, that innate people-pleasing drive, which a lot of women over and above men experience, is sometimes described as a trauma condition. And I would say in my own experience, I definitely wanted attention from my father, and I felt if I was perfect, I might get it. So I would say if we were in a psychotherapeutic practice right now, I would probably say, yes, I just wanted my dad to see me. But I had an innate confidence and an innate excitement in my own potential. And that really, really stemmed from a young age. Excuse me. If I think about my little girl dreams, I wanted to be a famous actress, or I wanted to be not just an author, I wanted to run a publishing empire. So I always saw myself in this vision of success that was incredibly motivating. And I was excited by life. And in fact, I describe my CV as a chronology of passions explored, because I have literally leaned into what interested me. And it's certainly what I'm encouraging my children to do. It's follow your heart, follow your passions, not money, not extrinsic success motivators, but in your heart, what interests you most. So that was a core motivation. But I think pushing myself to the nth degree was, I made mistakes along the way where I compromised some of my allocation of time and attention. For instance, I didn't have childcare for many years because I felt that would be failure in some form. So when I launched my first business in my late 20s, and I had really young children, but the seeds of an idea and my entrepreneurial chapter was beginning and the business was flourishing, I didn't have childcare. I wanted to be the main mummy, the main child carer, and so I would put them to bed and then I would start work, and I'd work through the night. And then I wondered why I started burning out. I just wasn't sleeping, and that was my own choice. But I didn't know that it was okay to have childcare, and that took me quite a bit of therapy and inner work to start recognising, if I want to have my dreams and I want to be a good mother, childcare can be part of the mix. But that was a psychological journey I had to go on.
That's so fascinating, and it feels like your success as someone who's, when I was researching you, I was like, how has she achieved all of this? And I'd argue that your success is so much more, you're linking the mind and body together now, and perhaps you weren't doing that as much in your 20s. I wanted to ask you, throughout that kind of burnout stage, we've spoken about other women, we've touched on it, and you said that you didn't want to get a nanny and things like that. Was there ever any competition or kind of, I want to do this by myself? And is that, you mentioned your father, so proving it to, potential father, yourself. Was there any level of success with other women and any kind of competition there?
I wouldn't say so, because I was an entrepreneur. The first chapter of my career was in entrepreneurialism. I actually came into corporate very late. So that initial foray into who am I and how am I going to show up in the world was very self-motivated, and I was a self-starter, and I didn't really have the mentors or support around me or competition. I was just fueled by a passion and a desire. And generally at that period, it was around 2004 when I set the business up, there were other strong female leaders that were also starting similar businesses, and we propped each other up. We did business with each other. We collaborated. So thinking about competition with women, I only experienced that coming into the corporate arena. And that has been very tough and startling for me to experience and witness, because I am all heart and I have good intentions, and it has really shocked and derailed me to see how brutal women can be to women. And I've really felt judgment and competitiveness, which has, really surprised me. But I've only seen that in corporate, and I stay well away from it. But what I have found that's nurturing in corporate is strong female role models. And the older I've become, the more I've really started to respect and revere older women or men. And the older the mentor, the better. And I really gravitate now to older women. So I work with I'll have different women mentoring me for different aspects of my life, whether it's a psychotherapist or an energy healer or a business mentor. And the oldest one I have in my life at the moment, who I'm blessed to work with, is 80.
Wow.
So I really trust the older women's experience or men's, but that's where I've started to gravitate towards women now.
And that learnt experience. Do you think a woman can have it all?
I think it's absolutely possible for us all to have it all when we very precisely architect what all means to us individually. And this is where we go wrong.
Yeah.
Because we have a finite amount of time. We have a finite amount of life to live. 4,000 weeks is apparently the average lifespan. So in our finitude, we need to ensure that we are focusing our attention and our energy in the right directions. And this is where too many of us are derailed, and we experience objective attention, which means that our attention is being stolen by media or gossip or tasks that aren't necessarily oriented to that which matters most to us. So a lot of the work that I teach is around really zoning in on subjective attention and ensuring that we focus that energy and time in the stuff that matters most to us and that is aligned with our values. And it all starts with how we manage our own energy, pay attention to our energetic vibes, because there's absolute gold in that intuitive pull towards the things that energize us.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I really want to jump into the book, but just before we do, I want to go a bit deeper into your experience of burnout. You mentioned that you had some medical tests and you were at a position with your doctor, and you were saying, I'm not stressed. It's, it's not right.
Yeah.
I can crack on. When did you let down that, I guess, guard or shield, going, okay, this is burnout. This is really happening. And when did you start putting in the work, and how did that look like for you?
So it was probably across a decade that work actually took. And as I was experiencing the burnouts, I'd be lying there in bed, unable to do anything, with other people looking after my children, other people doing the work that I couldn't do, and that swirl of shame and inadequacy and failure lying there inert was too tough to bear. I didn't want to be living my life in bed. So I knew I had to create systemic change. So my path started by addressing the physical first and foremost. Because I was flawed physically, I started addressing, well, how can I modify myself physically? So experimenting with giving up alcohol, giving up sugar, with increasing exercise. Very, very late in this exploration, realizing that sleep actually was core to everything. So I started dabbling with physical, but that wasn't enough. So then eventually I started really concentrating on the mental realm. So I've always been a journaler, but I started expanding the journaling to include gratitude. I started becoming a lot more rigorous around meditation and mindfulness and focusing in on more mental zen. And it all started to work, and gradually the intensity of the burnout started to alleviate, and it was less and less, but it was still there. But for me, the real turning point was when I started to address emotional dysregulation. And this is what's so key in the work that I teach now, because we'll all have various niggles that are bubbling up inside us. Something doesn't feel right. But the systemic ones that are simmering underneath our conscious thought often, where there's some subconscious dissonance with the life that we're living, the behaviors that we're exhibiting, the job that we're doing, the relationships that we're having. If there's something there that's out of alignment with what our soul knows is right and true and great for us, then that is going to be creating this perpetual simmering anxiety that creates a stress that becomes chronic. And if we don't address those emotional niggles and actually start to examine what's under the emotional disquiet in our lives, then I don't believe we can ever sustain the impact that we so desire. So for me, it was about starting to recognize there were very brave decisions that I needed to make. And probably the most devastatingly impactful one was divorcing after 26 years of togetherness. And that was such a big decision, and with such a heavy heart did my ex-husband and I go into exploring that. But actually, we both started to recognize that the stress that had been creating within ourselves, experiencing a relationship that was no longer working, was actually something we needed to free ourselves from. So that was an example of a very big decision that needed to be made. But with a lot of my clients, it's around the cultural work environment that they're in, or it's around relationships. And it's when we get into that brave, courageous place of examining the emotional side of ourselves, I really believe that's where magic work can start to happen and it becomes transformational.
When you speak about the emotional side, in a nutshell, do you kind of mean your gut feeling and trusting your gut?
Yes, that's part of it, but it's recognizing where there is any surge of emotion that comes up with an intensity that can't be ignored, that's uncomfortable. So we want to feel joy, we want to feel happiness, but if we're feeling a mainstay of sadness or a mainstay of irritation or aggression or frustration, we have to examine that uncomfortable emotion, because if we spend the majority of our waking hours in a state of emotional discomfort, that's stressing the nervous system. And we're not designed to exist in a place of stress. So we've got to lift up the hood on what's beneath those triggers and find the gold there. And I really do talk about it as gold. When we get triggered, get curious, because it means there's an opportunity for growth. And it might be scary, but on the other side is going to be something that's really pretty cool.
Yeah, in your book you speak about triggers, and when we spoke the other day, I found that so interesting, because often, and I think men and women do this, they have a trigger and they either act on it and shut it down, and it could be impulsive behaviour, it could be anger, it could be resentment, or something in that form. But rarely do people sit with that uncomfortable feeling,
Exactly.
work on it,
Yeah.
and then move forward.
Exactly.
And I just find, as I said in the introduction, your book is a Bible, because it's not just about an experience of burnout and how to overcome burnout and prevent this. You talk about foods which are better for you. You talk about how to get better sleep. You talk about triggers. You talk about so many different strategies, and there's, different exercises you can do. So I just wish I read your book earlier in my life, but I'd love now to deep dive into your latest bestseller. You built a powerful framework that you've developed to support others. Could you walk us through the 8 energizing strategies that you outline in your book?
Yes, absolutely. And as you've just alluded to, it is holistic in its nature, because we are holistic beings, and it is about that mind, body, soul realm. So the book is divided into 2 parts. There's 8 strategies, and the first 4 strategies are what I call the foundational imperatives. And this is about the work that we need to do to go within, to sustain ourselves in such a way where we can then go forward and go out. So these inner dimensions start with energy, and then we go into mindset, and then we go into purpose, and then we go into time. Now, with energy, it's about acknowledging our bio-individuality and learning to flow with our energetic rhythms, and honouring the fact that we have the ability to create all the energy we need to do all the juicy stuff that we want to do, but we've all fallen out of sync with natural rhythms, and we're in this place of fake stimulation and upping our energy levels with caffeine or energy drinks or whatever it might be. So I invite readers to just come back in tune with their harmonic energy state. So that's the energy strategy. And then the mindset strategy is coming into this realm of self-accountability and not blaming the world, not falling victim to the frenetic pace that is happening and the never-ending task list, because that is never going to end. But it's stepping into a place of a growth mindset and a place of positivity and ownership. Then we move into purpose and intentionality, because, like I say, if we're not directing our attention in the area that matters most, then we're going to be diluting our potential power. So it's about showing up every day intentionally. And then finally, time. And I don't talk about time management in the sense that it's time boxing or traditional techniques we might have learned in yesteryear. I talk about falling in love with time and becoming custodian of time by ensuring that we're aligned with our soul's calling and focusing subjectively on how we allocate our time. So once we've done that work, we're empowered. Then we're ready to go out into the world and wave our magic wands and sprinkle the work that is our destiny to sprinkle out into the world. So part 2 is what I call the expansion phenomenon. And this is where we come at the world with a state of grace and a state of courage and confidence. So this section starts with a strategy around work. How do we take our biggest, brightest, boldest work out into the world? What does that look like? Then we go into managing our wealth and what wealth and success looks like for us on a very personal level. How do we redefine success? Then we go into connection and how we can impact the dynamic of our relationships, whether it's our intimate relationships, our familial relationships, or our networks, in such a way that we nurture and nourish relationships so that we have positive influence and positive impact. And that includes the art of listening, public speaking. That's all in there. So it's very practical. The strategies are pragmatic as they are inspiring. And then the final strategy is fulfillment. And how do we get to this place of integrity where we are honouring our truths and following an intuitive, soulful, spiritual path? Because success for me is about feeling peaceful and being able to go to sleep at night with a sense of peace in our hearts. And that can only really ever come when we are living in honour of our true integrity. So the final strategy is around how do we bring all that richness together and ensure that we can maintain our lives in a state of grace.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. You just spoke about success around, to you, it's feeling peaceful and, potentially content and, having that feeling. So has that changed? Has that kind of, through your journey, would you say 20 years ago, if you were asked the same question, what does success look like to you, would you have said the same thing?
I don't think I had ever examined success. I think I had just got swept up in ideologies of success that weren't mine. So from familial guidance, from institutionalized guidance, I believed success was about money, status, power, all of the extrinsic traps that we can fall into. And it took me definitely a long time and a lot of this inner work to start to recognize that success isn't about money. You can be incredibly wealthy. You can seemingly be in a great long-term relationship, but what's going on within is what matters most. Yeah. And if you are out of alignment and living your life where you're behaving in a way that satisfies someone else's success ideology, you're never going to feel that inner peace. So I had to redefine success, and actually the first book I wrote was Flourish, Redefine Success. And for me, that was an important journey that was very transformational. So yeah, success now is very different because I've started to examine it.
Yeah. I wanted to ask about, say, if we spoke earlier on about when you started to go through burnout and you're in bed, you couldn't get out of bed. I've been through burnout myself, and there were days where I just didn't really want to, not Netflix and chill. And it took me a while to, kind of pick myself up again. And I was lucky enough to be able to afford therapy and different strategies to support me. But if there was someone listening who they believe they're going through burnout, they can't get, off their sofa. They're going into work on, just kind of autopilot mode. They don't really have the strategies yet in their life to kind of move forward. What advice would you give to that person?
Well, firstly, I'm so sorry that you've experienced that, and it evidences how common, we know burnout is so common. And that feeling of utter depletion and fear when you are lying in the pit, the burnout pit, as I call it, there's two approaches. So the first one is absolutely starting with small micro steps. Recovering from burnout starts by reconnecting in with who we are and what's going on in the inside, and starting to reclaim a sense of self-esteem, because quite often that is what has been eroded as well. There's too much a volume of intensity and overwhelm of anxiety that has hit us and floored us into this state of burnout. So we need to very gently nurture ourselves back into a place of self-esteem where we want to look after ourselves. So that takes a conscious awareness of who am I, and actually what can I do to nourish myself right now. And that can be as small as putting a piece of lemon in your water that might feel like a treat. Just small little step-by-step nuggets of nurturing and treating ourselves. So we start to build a little sense of self-esteem. And so much of success in life is around how much we are compassionate with ourselves. Because when we love ourselves, we are giving off really nice vibes, and actually it's easier for other people to love us. So it starts with these little micro steps of showing ourselves that we love ourselves. That's really important. But all too often, the reason that we hit this catastrophic moment where we are lying in the burnout pit is because our overall lives are out of alignment and we're misdirecting ourselves. So we've lost intentionality towards what matters most. So often the work that I do with people in my clinic ends up becoming a journey of actually realizing they're not motivated to get up and do what they're doing each day because it's wrong for them.
Yeah.
It's the wrong team,
Yeah.
or it's the wrong job, or they've been focusing on the wrong tasks, and it comes back to that emotional misalignment. So you're not going to want to recover and get up to go back and do that particular job if that doesn't motivate you. Because honestly, when you're following your bliss, to use Joseph Campbell's very famous and popularized phrase, when you follow your bliss, the energy is abundant, the motivation is non-stop. It flows and flows. So that's why we start small, but definitely look at the macro.
Yeah, I mean, we'll speak about this a little later in the podcast about energy. And I know from doing some energy work that when you're vibing at a different frequency, people who are vibing at that, higher stage, they'll kind of be matches for you, and you'll vibe with them.
Yep.
Whereas if you're in the burnout pit, it's quite hard from personal experience, and I know your experience, to kind of climb out of the pit. But once you're there, it's the micro steps that you spoke about, and just a little bit. It's like going for a walk that day, getting some sunlight on your face.
Absolutely nature is magic.
And you've spoken about putting yourself first. And just from personal experience, when I started putting myself first, which was only recently, there was a certain level of guilt and feeling selfish. Mm-hmm. How did you ever feel like you were being selfish, and how did you kind of quiet those demons?
Absolutely. I think I used to teach this in some of my retreats, actually, that self-awareness is not selfish, because I felt a little bit of shame that I was self-aware. So I've always been really fascinated by personal development, even at a very young age. So when I was 12, I used to go with my mum to our local library and get personal development, self-hypnosis cassettes. And I would experiment with anything from how to get better posture, because I wanted to have a straighter back at school, or whatever it was. So I was always very interested in personal development. And part of my exploration of self was through journaling, and I have journaled since I was 8 years old. No word of a lie. My loft has stacks and stacks of journals. I've always been an avid journaler. But in my 20s, when I fell in love with my ex-husband and moved in, and I'm living in this house full of loads of other people, and it's the fun house, I felt really embarrassed about the fact that I was a journaler. And it felt to me something that was not mainstream. I mean, it's different now. That was a long time ago. But I felt ashamed of the fact that I wanted to spend time writing. And to the point where I actually stopped. There's a gap in my stack of journals for a few years in my early 20s. And it was only when I became pregnant with my first child at the age of 27 that I then reintroduced that practice of journaling, because I didn't want to forget the magic. And it started to help me reground into who I was. And I started to realize this self-awareness is so important. But I felt embarrassed. I felt my ex-husband would be judging me if I went upstairs to sit and journal. I really felt a shame around self-awareness. But it's absolutely fundamental. It's the start point for how any of us can flourish in life. It's the most important aspect of self, to become self-aware. And if we think about how we take self-awareness into the workplace, how we examine ourselves as leaders, and how we've led meetings, how we've shown up for our team, with our boss, within the organisation, it's so important. And for me, working in corporate over the past 13 years, I've spent a lot of time with my teams encouraging this self-awareness individually and collectively. How are we showing up as a team? How are we running these meetings? How are we conveying the work that we're doing to the rest of the workforce? So I celebrate self-awareness. It's not selfish. It's so important to growth and impact.
Yeah, I mean, people say that you can't pour from an empty cup.
Exactly.
And if you're not filling up your own cup, putting on that oxygen mask, as you say as well, like, you're not going to be able to give that love to anyone else. So that self-love is so, I think society, which is kind of the next part that I want to go into, is it's hard for a woman, I find. And, you know, we're taught like little girls are taught to be seen and not heard.
Mm-hmm.
And we've grown up with that, particularly in my generation. And it's that conditioning to kind of get you to the stage of going, okay, I need to have some soothing time, or I want to have a bath and just have quiet time for me. I want to sit down and journal.
Yeah.
And that's fine, you know, to take that time to yourself.
But we have to be able to recognize when it's an urgent requirement to self-soothe. And that is something that I'm trying to inject into the centre of organisations at the moment, because I think this is core to the burnout epidemic that's happening today. Too many of us don't understand how important it is to regulate our nervous systems. So, I mean, very topically right now, we've got Rachel Reeves having cried in Parliament yesterday. And to me, that is evidence of a woman in such an extremely pressurised role at the helm of the country, so dysregulated in her nervous system that she's unable to manage or process the swathe of emotions coursing through her in that really intense, fraught moment of some public humiliation and nasty attack. But I think that too often in the workplace or in our personal lives, we are not recognising, ooh, I'm in fight, flight or freeze. I'm in a chronic stress state. I'm in an amygdala hijack, which means my brain isn't really functioning very well. And if we're unable to recognise that, and we're still showing up and trying to do our do, no one else is going to recognise it. All they're going to see is somebody making perhaps irrational decisions, poor judgments. And so the quicker we can learn to understand our stress responses, how our body alerts us to the fact that we're actually in panic mode or in an emotionally dysregulated state, the quicker we're able to achieve what is required in terms of leadership, in terms of impact, but only we can do that. And you might have a very different stress response to me. So we've got to really learn how to tune into our own systems and bodies to make sure that when we're in that triggered state of being very, very stressed, that we know how to step out, take a bath, or if we're in the middle of a busy working day, go and just sit down, do some deep breathing like we did before we started this episode, or go and journal before we go into that meeting. Anything that will empower us to self-soothe so that we're back in our bodies and out of potentially deranged mental swirls. It's so important.
You mentioned some powerful stats in your book around burnout, especially the gender gap, stating that burnout tends to hit women hardest, with 43% of female leaders experiencing burnout compared to 31% of men. Your book also stated that in 2023, the Careers After Babies report showed that 85% of women leave full-time work within 3 years of having their first child, and nearly 20% leave the workforce altogether for good. Why do you think that burnout manifests differently for women?
Well, it's a really clear and disappointing answer that women are responsible for 68% of the emotional and domestic labour at home. So we have the added burden of needing to show up and deliver for our careers, but at home we're needing to show up and be the nurturers, the peacemakers, the domestic and emotional leads in our own homes. And so we have this assault of demands that are pulling us in so many different directions simultaneously. And naturally, we are doing more. That's fact. Statistically, we're doing more. Layer in the fact that we have a preponderance towards perfectionism and people pleasing, which sadly we know is part of our cultural socialization. It means that we are under pressure that, yes, we put ourselves under because we want to perform to such high levels and we don't want to let people down, but we are trying to perform to that level in so many different domains of our lives simultaneously. And it's unsustainable. It really is unsustainable. So part of what I address in the book is actually examining every aspect of our lives, from the work to the home to the childcare to whatever it looks like, and actually designing a plan of where am I best placed to allocate my time and energy, and what could I outsource, if you like. So I am privileged enough to be able to have a cleaner. If I am in a very intense work focus or child focus because exams are going on and I need to put all my attention on the children for a particular period, then I would selectively reduce my domestic load by increasing the amount of additional support that I have. So I'm very conscious and careful around architecting my time in such a way I'm focusing in the areas that energize me and that matter most. So it's important for women to be even more aware of just organizing that time and attention allocation, because we are under so much more pressure. And it's why I'm so impassioned by trying to get into the heart of businesses to say we have to support an education for women to know how possible it is to maintain the lives in all their rich abundance. And something that upsets me a lot is women in middle management that come to me that feel, or at the start of their careers, where they feel it's a world of polarities, where they can only see a future of career or children. They can't see the blend. And I absolutely believe that it's possible. I've got 4 children, and I solo parent these 4 children today. And for anyone to be making choices that are as deterministic as I'm never going to be a mother because I choose career, that is shutting a door through naivety and through fear that I won't be able to accelerate and ascend in my career if I have a family as well. And that's absolutely not true. If we architect our lives in such a way where the job gives us joy because we're applying our strengths and our energy in the right direction, and we found the right job and the right culture and the right team, there'll be an abundance of energy. And then if we organize our lives, we can have the family too. But it's up to us to make sure that we're conscientiously choosing and architecting our lives as such. It is tough. It's really tough. And for women, the plight of showing up when we've got that 68% of the emotional and domestic labour is exhausting. So I encourage more conversation in organisations. We have to change this culture where, yes, the pandemic has invited this world of hybrid work, but we seem to be going back into presenteeism, and that doesn't support parents. So we need to maintain this equality of parental leave between men and women. That should be equitable. We should be encouraging the flexible working. It should all be about output rather than presenteeism. And I really hope that I can start to change some of the narrative around how we work so that amazingly dynamic, powerful women can have the impact in the workplace. We know that our rich emotional intelligence is really positive to companies and to the bottom line. So we want women in organisations. We don't want women choosing either family or career. We want the blend.
Yeah. What is the biggest thing, in your opinion, in 2025 that needs to be changed in the workforce?
There needs to be more acknowledgement that we are human. And I'm hoping this AI revolution is going to create more of that conversation, because the machines can do the machine work. So let's us be the humans. So let's learn how we can work better, how we can work again, because we've fallen into this trap of frenetic productivity being the mainstay. And that's fundamentally wrong, because when we're in a state of frenetic output, we'll crash and burn. We can see it. The burnout statistics are worsening year on year on year. It's costing the global economy over $1 trillion a year. It's worsening. And until we start teaching how to self-manage, that's going to carry on. So we need to have conversations about the fact that there is emotional responsibility outside of the workplace, so that there's more of an understanding. But it's certainly not about moaning. It's certainly not about asking for excuses. It's certainly not about saying, I'm a woman, I've got children that I'm responsible for, please can I have more holiday, or this or that or the other. But it's about encouraging honest and open conversations about the fact that I'm really, really busy outside of work as well, and being able to say, no, I'm starting the board meeting at 11 o'clock on a Monday because that would really help me because I could do the school run, or whatever it might be. But it's about having these conversations where we're not asking for excuses, but we're just architecting perhaps the workflow in such a way where it doesn't create more stress for the individuals.
Yeah, and how realistically, let's take the UK, how realistic do you think it is to train companies?
My work is wholly devoted to this. So, and what I am getting is a lot of response from CEOs who are battling with high churn or high absenteeism. And it's the CEOs that control the purse strings.
Yeah.
And if they're looking at their organisation and recognising that there's a real problem because too high a proportion of the workforce are signed off on long-term sick leave through stress and through burnout, they want to have a conversation with me about how we can start to change the dynamic. And because my message is a positive message of empowerment for individuals and the overall organisation, CEOs are listening. So at the moment, I'm being invited into a lot of companies to share the strategies and start to enliven workers that it's absolutely possible to flourish at work. So I feel confident. I feel it's more necessary than ever. And the disruption that AI is inviting is making this more important than ever. So I'm going to stay optimistic.
No, I mean, I think that's incredible. And I feel like when you mention AI, because as we know, so many companies are scared of it, and, you know, it's going to take our jobs potentially. I work in data and insights, and I'm like, will it? But how you framed it in the sense of let's use it to just kind of take away those data laborious tasks, or the laborious tasks in anyone's kind of discipline, and then let's have more human conversations.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what we're missing. And we're missing, you speak about it a lot in your book about realigning what those values are. And, you know, if you're out of sync with your values and what your kind of purpose might be, then of course you're going to, you know, potentially hit a wall and, you know, potentially feel burnout in your body.
Yeah.
But I think from a kind of a larger kind of perspective, I think companies need to realise what their values are and their values for employees, and be transparent with them.
Absolutely. And there's a famous Harvard Business Review study around the impact of positive relational energy that leaders are exuding is the number one determining factor in the success of an organisation through its cultural high performance. So I think in this era of AI, where machines are going to do a lot of the data crunching, but the ability of employees to maintain and exude positive relational energy is what's going to become ever more important to that business thriving. So actually, I think we're going to see more of a focus on going within that isn't necessarily bucketed into well-being as such, because I've heard a lot of businesses are slashing the well-being budgets. But I think it'll become more of a strategic move around how do we empower the workforce through learning the skills of positive relational energy, how we interact with each other, and thus how we're able to motivate and inspire each other to do better work and then be more productive, but happily productive.
We've spoken about it and we've touched on it briefly. But when I read your book, I was like, well, it's so, you know, it's around boundaries essentially as well. And you spoke about in your book that no one's really doing the 9 till 6 anymore because, you know, there's flexible working since COVID, and, you know, mothers are asking for kind of flexible hours, and so are men. how important are boundaries within the workplace? And if someone's struggling with people pleasing, potentially, and enforcing boundaries, say if they're working with someone difficult or they don't feel comfortable enforcing that boundary, what advice would you give?
Well, start experimenting with yourself and with boundaries. That was what I did. And I remember the first time I was sitting on a board in an agency and the CEO had put in 8 a.m. board meetings and I couldn't do it. I wanted to take my kids to school. I really loved the school run. I actually used to love the school run, the singing on the, how are you all? I love the school run. And it was always like a nice thing for me to do. And also I lived quite a commute away and an 8 a.m. board meeting was a real challenge. And so I said, this took so much courage and so much digging deep and journaling and like, how am I going to do this? I said to the CEO, would there be any chance that we could do it at 11 a.m. on Monday morning? His reaction was like, yeah, of course, fine. And I came away from that like, oh my God. I asserted a boundary. I asked for something that really benefits me. And they said yes. Everyone was fine. And it happened and it flowed. And for me, that was such a penny dropping moment of, wow, I worked out something that would benefit me and I asserted a boundary. So, and I've had to experiment in relationships as well, even with my new fiance now, learning to have boundaries. It doesn't come naturally to me. I have to really learn about how I assert my boundaries. But so my advice is start experimenting. Start experimenting personally. If you're really notoriously bad at setting boundaries for yourself, experiment at home, do it privately, do it with a family member, but just start experimenting with boundaries. And if you set yourself a 7-day task to just start putting some boundaries in place that protect you and protect your ability to thrive, by the end of 7 days you'll be able to observe, wow, that went well, or that friendship has improved, or that's fallen by the wayside. But you'll start to get some clarity around what is and isn't working in your life. And then you'll start to feel empowered. And then you'll be able to take it into your workplace. And then you can start experimenting. So play with it. Boundaries are so powerful. And I do write about them in the last strategy, because that's part of honouring your truth and being in your integrity, is putting your boundaries in place.
And I think boundaries, as you say, are so important, but it can make your relationship, your work relationship, your personal relationship, or say a friendship, grow so much because you respect that person. If someone enforces a boundary with me, I'm like, I'm so glad they told me that, because I wouldn't have known otherwise.
Fantastic.
Do you know what I mean?
I do, entirely.
And when I've enforced it with some friends sometimes, I'm like, okay, they might not reply. And then when they do, they're like, yeah, cool. I'm like, oh, awesome. And it's that feeling of, I'm more in control, I feel better, and I respect that friend even more, and we're growing together.
Exactly.
So I think it's brilliant. I want to move on to energy. What does energy hygiene look like in your life today?
I'm very intuitive with my energetic flow. And I am meditating twice, if not 3 times a day, through breath work to connect into my vibrational essence. So it has become a conscious practice for me to really pay attention to my energy, to the point where I feel a little rush of energy. If something is right, I can tell the difference between a rush of energy if something is wrong, and I feel that energetic connection with people, and I have become more and more aware of it. So I'm aware of energy on that invisible dimension realm as much as I'm aware of my physical and mental energy. Now, of course, for all of us, we can pay attention to the physical energy when we're exhausted or when we're buzzing with cortisol. I'm so acutely aware and in tune of that I'm able to really understand when I need to pause and nourish, as we've talked about. So I protect my own energy today by physically eating in such a way. I focus on nutritionally dense food. My diet is all focused around the vitality of life force giving food. So I'm very interested in that dynamic of feeding myself vitality. And when people come into my clinic and say, oh, I don't have any energy, and we examine their diet, and I said, well, how much life force exists in that diet you've just described?
Yeah.
There's such a correlation. So I've given up alcohol finitely. I've dabbled with that across my life, but now it's gone forever, and that feels like a gift I've given myself. I'm struggling with caffeine, on and off, quite bored of that, but it's only teeny tiny bits. I'm just aware of how I can physically honour my energetic state physically, exercise, sleep, and then mentally I'm so conscious of nourishing my energy in the sense that I like to spend a lot of time in the loving vibration, in the vibration of compassion, in the good vibrations. So I like to spend time focusing on kindness. If I feel myself swirling into a moment of depression or self-pity, which obviously, it happens. I'm human. If I experience that, I've really learnt that you can step out of that negative emotion by focusing on someone else. So do something nice for someone else, send someone an email saying thank you, or go and pick a flower and give it to one of my children, or whatever it might be. Do something kind. So I'm really focused on just maintaining positive, energetic vibes so I can just keep them flowing through me. And breath work really feels to me like this magic elixir of life, where when we do the deep breathing and we soothe our nervous system, we connect into a soulful place that feels so steady and soft and nurturing and reassuring. And the more time I can spend in that place, the more life seems to be great. So I really paid a lot of attention. Energy is absolutely everything.
Energy is everything. And Bianca and I did a breathwork kind of meditation before this podcast, which I'm so grateful for. And it was only a few minutes. When you open your eyes, you're a bit like, where am I? We need to do the interview now. And it can really take you out of your mind. And
exactly,
breathwork is, it can flush out so much trauma from your body as well. We spoke about when I met you, the body keeps score. And there's so many certain parts of your body, potentially even from when you had your burnout, decade, that there was probably part of your body which had stored that. And it sounds like over the last, the last few years, you've really kind of flushed that out, but worked on that. In a world where burnout is so normalised, how can women take up more space in a way that protects their energy, health and voice?
It comes back to that authenticity. Who are you? Own who you are. Own what matters most. Own your experience. Own your gorgeous, unique story. Own it. Be proud of it. And tell the world, because I believe each one of us is sitting on this gold mine of experience and opinions and thoughts and richness. So take ownership of it and be proud of it and don't hide it. I think too many of us let our dreams dim, and that's such a shame and such a waste. And I fundamentally don't believe there should be any wastage or there should be any dreams that are left unexamined or unexplored. So I would invite anyone listening or watching to just really tune into their soulful self, their authenticity, who they are and what the impact is they want to have out into the world. And if they're lost, like I had this moment once where my eldest son, I remember him coming into the kitchen and going, "Mum, I don't know what my purpose is." And I just sat him down and said, look, it doesn't have to be this broad, lofty goal of eradicating child hunger in the world. It can be as simple as, I want to be happy today. And it's just about owning that and enjoying that and tuning into what that looks like for you.
My speaking about breathwork, my breathwork coach, you know that phrase, what's the worst that can happen? In her breathwork studio, it says, there's a quote which just says, what's the best that can happen?
Love that.
And it's true. It's, you know, you coming back to that stat you said earlier in the episode. So it's like 4,000 weeks that we're on, you know, on average on, you know, on this planet. And what's the best that can happen? You know, you might as well try. The worst, you know, is that you're going to fail, but you will learn from that.
Exactly. It's that, I love the quote, what if I fail? What if I fly?
Yeah.
And I love that. Yeah, what if?
Yeah.
What if? I'm taking a major life risk right now, having just stepped out of corporate, throwing all my energy, passion and focus into this book, this mission, Success with Grace. So I'm putting everything on the line. What if I fail? But what if I fly?
Yeah.
It's what I'm living, and it's scary, but it's exhilarating, and I feel alive. And yes, if I fail, at least I tried. And it's fun.
No regrets.
It's fun. Exactly. No regrets.
So I know that you are going on a book tour soon. So I'd love to talk a bit more about your next phase of work, what the next few months hold for you. Yeah, please, can you tell us?
Thank you. Yes, I'm super excited about the next chapter. It's been, since leaving corporate, it's been very much around laying the foundations for really establishing the next phase of the movement. And actually just today we've launched the Success with Grace movement. So today does mark a bit of a milestone where we are really going out into the world with a splash. We have a new TV series which is being launched next Monday at 6 p.m, the Big Impact show, where I interview inspiring leaders, trailblazers, creative celebrities, talking about how they epitomize success with grace. So really excited about this show's content, because I believe we have to lead by example. I can talk about it all I like. The theory is in the book, but actually exemplifying and finding and celebrating the people who are already proving it's possible to have success with grace is something that matters a lot to me. As part of the book tour, I'm inviting organisations to allow me to come in. I'm doing keynotes in organisations from Google to Amazon to Snap to British Gas, talking about how we can ingrain these strategies into the heart of the organisations, and ensuring that everyone gets copies of the book as well, because it's about scaling these strategies. And then we have the book tour. We're going up and down the country, where I'm going to be doing daily events and book signings and talking about core strategies in the book. And all of this is happening whilst I'm running the Burnout Clinic, still serving my clients and inspiring the way forward to ensure that more people have access to this information and relearn to love work again, and understand that it's about graceful productivity, and that success with grace is everybody's right.
Bianca, this episode has fueled me with such positive energy. I feel so happy and honoured that you've been my second guest on Owning Space. So thank you so much.
Bless you.
I've learned so much from you, and I really recommend, you know, everyone to buy Bianca's book, because as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, it is like a Bible that you can refer to. As we say, it's like holistic. There's exercises in it. It can really, really support you, not just through going through burnout, but I feel like it's kind of a go-to guide for living your life right. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me on this show. It's been such a pleasure talking to you, and this is such important work that you're doing. Thank you so much, and I really wish you so much luck with the show and the response, and I'm so glad that I could be of service here today.
Thanks so much for listening to Owning Space. If this episode resonated, please follow the show and rate it on Spotify or Amazon Music. If you're on Apple Podcasts, I'd love it if you could leave a review. This will help more women find these conversations. And together, we can start reclaiming women's health and the space we've always deserved.